At my nephew's dinner, my sister handed me takeout saying, "Seats are reserved for real family," then expected me to pay the $2,800 bill. I smiled and told the waiter, "I don't pay for strangers." Let me explain how I got to that moment and what happened next, because this wasn't just about one dinner. This was the culmination of being the family ATM for 15 years, while being treated like an optional extra. My name is Marcus, I'm 34 and a senior software architect. This is how I turned their own game against them. I make $180K annually, and I've been subsidizing my family's lifestyle since I landed my first real job at 22. My sister Sarah makes maybe 45Ks at her retail manager position. My parents are on fixed retirement income of about $300 to $200 monthly. And my nephew Jake was fresh out of college with student loans. When they wanted to celebrate anything, guess who got the bill? The text came Thursday afternoon while I was wrapping up code reviews. Sarah wanted to celebrate Jake landing a consulting position at 75K. Good money for a recent grad, but nowhere near enough to afford Romano's prices. She suggested Saturday at 7 p.m., mentioning, "It would be nice to have everyone there." What she didn't mention was her seating arrangement plan. I should have seen it coming when she insisted on Romano's instead of somewhere reasonable. The place runs $40, $60 per entree, with wine starting at $15 per glass. For 8 people, I was looking at easily $12,500, $3,000 before tip. I arrived 15 minutes early in my best suit, carrying a congratulatory card with a $500 check inside. The hostess led me to their reserved table, where everyone was already seated. Sarah and her husband Tom, my parents, Jake, and his girlfriend Emma. 8 chairs, place cards at each setting. Sarah's expression when she saw me approach told me everything. She stood up with that fake smile I'd learned to recognize over the years and intercepted me before I reached the table. "There's been a slight change in plans," she said, handing me a white takeout container. "Emma's parents decided to join us last minute, and space is tight. We ordered your usual chicken parmesan. You might be more comfortable in the hallway where there are chairs by the window." I stared at the takeout box, processing what was happening. She continued, "The seats are reserved for real family, and since this is such an important milestone, we want to keep it intimate. Real family. After 34 years of being her brother, after contributing an estimated $47,000 to family events over the past 15 years. Yes, I keep spreadsheets. I wasn't real family." "What exactly do you mean by real family?" I asked. She waved dismissively. "You know what I mean. People who are actually committed to the family, who show up consistently, who contribute meaningfully to our lives. You missed his graduation party 3 years ago for some work conference." The irony was crushing. I'd missed that party because I was in Chicago finalizing a deal that netted me the bonus I used for his $2,000 graduation gift. But apparently one absence invalidated everything else. I looked past her to the table. My parents sat there studying their napkins while my father chatted with Emma's parents. Neither objected to their son eating alone in a hallway during a family celebration. Jake gave me an apologetic shrug, but said nothing. "I understand perfectly," I told Sarah, and walked toward the hallway. The hallway had high-top chairs near floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the street. I chose one with a clear view of their table and the main dining area. I opened the takeout container and began eating lukewarm chicken parmesan with a plastic fork while watching my real family celebrate without me. From my position, I could see everything. They ordered calamari and bruschetta appetizers, $18 and $16 respectively. Wine glasses were filled and refilled. Emma's parents ordered the $65 lobster special. Jake stood up and made a speech, gesturing while everyone laughed and applauded. But as I sat there, something shifted inside me. The hurt transformed into cold, calculating anger I'd never felt toward my family before. I started thinking about patterns, about documentation, about strategy. This wasn't the first time. Christmas 2 years ago, they changed gift exchange time without telling me. I arrived to find everyone finished, my gifts unopened on a side table. Last year, Sarah scheduled Emma's birthday party the same day as mine, and everyone chose hers. Countless smaller incidents. Excluded from family photos, opinions dismissed, last to know about family news. I'd always told myself these were accidents or misunderstandings. But sitting in that hallway, I realized there was a deliberate pattern. I was the dispensable one whose presence was nice, but not necessary. except when the bill came. The waiter, a young professional with an expensive watch, walked past periodically. He nodded politely, probably wondering why someone in a suit was eating takeout in their hallway, but remained professional. Halfway through their meal, Emma's mother walked past me to the restroom. On her return, she paused. "I hope you're enjoying your meal," she said pleasantly. "The food here is always excellent. Are you Jake's uncle?" "Yes," I confirmed. "He speaks about you often. It's nice to finally meet you." I thanked her, not mentioning that we were meeting this way because her presence had displaced me from the family table. She seemed genuinely nice, with no idea what dynamic she'd walked into. After she returned to the table, I watched them order dessert, a $16 tiramisu they shared, while Sarah took photos with her phone, capturing what would become the official family memory of this celebration. I finished my meal and sat quietly, formulating a plan. The anger was controlled now, focused. I started calculating exact amounts. If they ordered what I could see, plus wine, plus automatic gratuity for parties over 6, we were looking at close to $3,000. When the waiter finally approached their table with the check, I watched with interest. He placed the leather folder in front of my father, who opened it and whistled softly at the total. There was discussion about splitting the bill, but Sarah shook her head and pointed toward me. "My brother will be taking care of everything," she told the waiter, gesturing toward the hallway. The waiter looked confused but nodded and walked over with the check folder. "The party requested that you handle the payment," he explained professionally. I opened it and saw the total, $2,147.83. Multiple courses, several bottles of wine, premium pricing, and a 20% gratuity automatically added for their party of 8. I had eaten a single entree from a takeout container alone in the hallway, but somehow I was expected to pay for the entire celebration. The waiter stood patiently while I reviewed the itemized receipt. Dishes I'd never seen, wines I'd never tasted, all for people who'd just excluded me from their table. "Everything look correct?" he asked. "Card or cash?" I closed the folder and handed it back to him. "There's been a mistake," I said calmly. "I'm not paying for this meal. I wasn't actually part of the dinner party. I ate my own takeout meal separately. You'll need to return the check to the people who actually enjoyed the food and service." The waiter looked more confused now, glancing back at the family table. "Could you clarify the situation?" "I was excluded from the dinner party and ate alone in the hallway, so I won't be covering their expenses," I explained simply. "I don't pay for strangers." Which was technically accurate. Sarah had made it clear I wasn't considered real family. The waiter returned to the table, and I watched the confusion unfold. He spoke quietly with my father first, then with Sarah. I could see gestures and pointing in my direction. Sarah's face turned red while my father looked bewildered. Sarah stood up and marched over. "What are you doing?" she demanded. "You're embarrassing the family. You're being petty and childish. You know perfectly well you're supposed to pay for family dinners." I remained calm. "You made it very clear that I'm not real family, and that real family members are the ones sitting at the table. Since I'm not real family, I see no reason to pay for their meal. The real family members can handle their own expenses." She started to argue, but I interrupted. "I understand my place in this family now, and I'm acting accordingly. If I'm not real family when it comes to seating arrangements and inclusion, then I'm not real family when it comes to financial obligations either." My father appeared at her shoulder, looking uncomfortable. "There's been a misunderstanding," he said. "Of course you're family. Please reconsider and help us out. I didn't bring enough cash and my credit card is close to its limit." I looked at this man who had sat silently while his daughter banished his son to eat alone in a hallway. "I appreciate your sudden recognition of my family status," I told him, "but that ship sailed when you allowed me to be excluded from the celebration." Jake approached, looking mortified. "I'm sorry," he said. "I didn't realize what Mom had planned. I can pay for the meal myself." I could see the panic in his eyes. A $75K consulting salary was good, but not $2,800 good, especially for someone just starting out with student loans. "This isn't your fault," I told him. "I'm not angry with you, but actions have consequences, and the family made a choice about how to treat me. Now they're experiencing the natural consequences of that choice." The waiter was hovering nearby, clearly wanting resolution. Other diners were starting to notice the commotion, and I could see the restaurant manager approaching. Sarah was practically vibrating with fury now. You're ruining his celebration, being vindictive over a simple seating arrangement, acting like a spoiled child who can't handle not being the center of attention. I stood up and faced her directly. You're absolutely right. I am being vindictive. I've finally learned what you've been teaching me for years, that I don't really matter to this family. Thank you for the lesson. I'll be applying it consistently going forward. The manager arrived and asked if there was a problem. Sarah immediately launched into an explanation about how I was refusing to pay for the meal, even though it had been arranged that I would cover it. The manager looked at me from my side. There was no such arrangement, I said simply. I ate my own separate meal and am not responsible for the other party's expenses. I showed him my takeout container as evidence. I was seated separately from their dinner party. The manager was clearly experienced in handling difficult situations. The party can settle their own bill, he said firmly. We can work with you on a payment plan if needed. The people who ordered and consumed the food are responsible for paying for it. I wished Jake congratulations on his promotion and told him I hoped he enjoyed his new position. I left the congratulatory card with him, though I had already decided to cancel the check inside. Then I walked toward the exit. Behind me, I could hear Sarah frantically calling other family members on her phone, trying to figure out how to cover the bill. My parents were arguing in hushed tones, and Jake was apologizing to Emma's parents for the awkward situation. As I reached the door, I turned back for one final look. My family was huddled around their table, dealing with the consequences of their choice to exclude me. The real family members were figuring out how to handle their real family expenses. I walked out into the evening air, feeling something I hadn't felt in years. Free. The fallout began immediately. By the time I got home to my downtown apartment, I had 17 missed calls and 43 text messages from various family members who had been contacted about the restaurant incident. My mother called first, her voice shaky with emotion. They had managed to scrape together enough money to cover the bill, but it required my father to use his emergency credit card and Jake to contribute his entire first paycheck from the new job. You humiliated us in public and damaged his special day, she said, framing the entire situation as my fault. No acknowledgement of how I'd been treated, no recognition that excluding me from the table had been inappropriate. In her version, I had simply decided to be cruel for no reason. I'm sorry you felt I ruined the evening, I told her, but I won't continue to subsidize family events that I'm not truly welcome to participate in. Going forward, the family can plan celebrations that fit within their budget, rather than expecting me to cover expenses for events I'm excluded from. Sarah's messages were less diplomatic. She accused me of being a narcissist who couldn't handle not being the center of attention, said I had always been jealous of her family, and demanded that I reimburse them for the meal and apologized to Jake. I didn't respond to her messages. Jake sent a separate text apologizing and asking if we could talk. He said he had tried to object when his mother suggested the seating arrangement, but she had insisted it was only practical given the space constraints. He offered to pay me back for all the family dinners I'd covered over the years, dozens of them. I called him back that evening. During our conversation, he admitted he had always felt uncomfortable with how the family treated me, but had never known how to address it. His mother had a way of making her preferences seem like natural, obvious choices everyone should go along with. I don't blame you for the situation, I told him, but I need you to understand something important. I'm done being the family's financial backup plan while being treated like an optional participant. If you want a relationship with me going forward, it needs to be separate from these family dynamics. He said he understood and asked if I would still be willing to have a private celebration for his promotion, just the two of us. I agreed, and we made plans to meet for lunch the following weekend at a restaurant of his choosing. The next few days were quiet, no calls or texts from anyone else. I began to think the family had decided to cut contact with me, which honestly felt like a relief. But then, my father showed up at my apartment building Thursday evening. The doorman called up to announce his arrival, and I told him to send Dad up. He looked exhausted and older than I'd ever seen him when I opened the door. "Can we talk?" he asked, and I invited him into my living room. We sat on my couch while he struggled to find words. Finally, he admitted he had handled the situation poorly. I should have spoken up when Sarah suggested the seating arrangement, but I wanted to avoid conflict on what was supposed to be a happy occasion. I acknowledge you were treated unfairly. Is there a way to fix things? I appreciated his acknowledgement, but explained this wasn't just about one dinner. I've been feeling excluded and undervalued by the family for years. The The restaurant incident was simply the final straw. What can I do to make things right? I need the family to genuinely recognize that I'm either a full member or I'm not. I can't continue being treated as dispensable when it comes to inclusion, but essential when it comes to financial contributions. My father nodded and said he would talk to Sarah. He asked if I would consider coming to Sunday dinner at their house to discuss things with the family. I agreed, but only with certain conditions. I wanted genuine acknowledgement of what had happened and clear understanding of what my role in the family actually was going forward. Sunday dinner was unlike any family gathering I'd ever attended. Everyone was there at my parents' house. My parents, Sarah and Tom, Jake and Emma. The atmosphere was tense from the moment I walked through the front door. Sarah had clearly been coached by my father because she began with what sounded like a rehearsed apology. "I'm sorry you felt excluded at the restaurant. It wasn't my intention to hurt your feelings. I was only trying to accommodate unexpected guests and thought you would understand." I listened to her carefully worded non-apology and realized she still didn't understand what she had done wrong. She was sorry I had felt bad, but wasn't acknowledging that her actions had actually been inappropriate. "I appreciate your apology," I said, "but I need you to understand the difference between feeling excluded and being explicitly excluded. Telling someone they can't sit with the family because seats are reserved for real family isn't a misunderstanding. It was a deliberate choice to treat them as lesser." My mother jumped in to defend Sarah. "Everyone knows your family. You're being overly sensitive about a simple seating arrangement. Maybe you need to consider whether you're overreacting to an admittedly awkward situation." This was the moment I realized nothing was going to change. They had called this meeting not to genuinely address the problem, but to convince me to go back to accepting my role as the family's financial support system, while remaining a second-class member. I stood up from the dining room table. "I finally understand where I stand," I told them. "I will no longer be contributing financially to family events, celebrations, or emergencies. I will no longer be available as the family's backup plan for anything requiring money or inconvenient tasks." Sarah immediately objected, pointing out all the times the family had been there for me. But when I asked her to be specific, she couldn't come up with examples. The truth was that I had been the one doing the supporting for years, financially and otherwise. "I'll maintain individual relationships with family members who want them, but I'm done with group family events where I'm treated as optional." I wished them well and walked toward the front door. Jake followed me out to my car in the driveway, clearly upset. "Is there anything I can do to change your mind? This isn't about you, and I still want to maintain our relationship. But I'm done trying to force myself into a family dynamic that doesn't value me." 3 months have passed since then. I've had several nice lunches with Jake, and we've developed a much better relationship now that it's not filtered through family politics. My father calls occasionally, and we have pleasant conversations that avoid family topics. My mother sends birthday and holiday cards to my apartment, but doesn't invite me to celebrations. Sarah and I don't communicate at all, which has been peaceful. Last week, Jake told me during our monthly lunch that Sarah had been complaining to anyone who would listen about how expensive family events had become now that I wasn't contributing. They had to significantly scale back my mother's 68th birthday celebration because the costs were too high when split among fewer people. He also mentioned that extended family members, our cousins and aunts, had started asking questions about why I was never at family gatherings anymore. When Sarah tried to explain that I had chosen to distance myself over a minor disagreement, other relatives began pressing for details. The story of the restaurant incident had gotten out, and not everyone was sympathetic to Sarah's version of events. I don't take satisfaction in their financial struggles or social awkwardness, but I also don't feel guilty about maintaining my boundaries. I've learned that family relationships, like any other relationships, need to be based on mutual respect and genuine care. For the first time in years, I'm not anxiously waiting for the next family crisis that will require my financial intervention. I'm not dreading holiday gatherings where I'll be treated as an afterthought. I'm not subsidizing celebrations that I'm barely welcome to attend. Instead, I'm building relationships with people who actually value my presence, not just my wallet. And I'm finally understanding what it means to be treated as real family, even if I had to find that family outside of my biological relatives. The 2,847.83 bill was expensive, but it was worth every penny for the clarity it provided about where I truly stood with these people. Sometimes the most expensive lessons are the most valuable ones.